Alright, so today we'll be talking about Mankiw's 10 principles of economics, and what these are basically 10 guiding ideas that explain the groundwork for basically how people act in an economic setting, and thus how economies work as a whole, because economies are made of people. Um, and there are 10 of them in case you couldn't tell. Number 1. Mankiw's first principle states that people face trade-offs. Basically, there are pros and cons to every decision, and a decision with lots of cons on both sides is generally difficult to make, and a decision with lots of pros on both sides is generally easy to make. However, a decision with pros and cons on both sides can usually be resolved using Mankiw's second principle. Number 2. Mankiw's second principle states that people respond to incentives, and incentives are things like money, or dreams, or the prospect of going to jail forever. Basically, they're things that drive us to take action. Normally, nice things drive us towards action, and bad things drive us away from action, because we like nice things. These first two principles are really very self-explanatory, and even inter-explanatory, and they go hand in hand with Mankiw's third principle, which will be coming up shortly. Number 3. Mankiw's third principle states that rational people make decisions at the margin. Now, rational people are people that systematically and purposefully try to do the best they can to achieve their objectives. Rational people are kind of like smart people, if you will. Now, smart people may make decisions like going to college or buying an eco-friendly car. These are normally decisions that lead to good outcomes. In other words, smart people make smart decisions. Now, dumb people, on the contrary, do not make smart decisions. They make different decisions, like perhaps drinking alcohol or... Actually, no, we can't talk about that. Dumb people make dumb decisions, like not studying for a test, and thus failing macroeconomics. Or they may even box while wearing their glasses and not wearing mouthguard. Now, these dumb and smart decisions may have a good outcome, but what was their cost? What drove Ed to make or not make certain decisions? What we're really seeing here is that incentives drive us to a middle ground. We can study a lot and have no fun and get an A+, or we can not study at all, have a lot of fun, but we'll get an F. But if we study just enough, then we'll get a B, which is just right. Really, Mankiw learned a lot from the Three Little Bears. Number 4. Mankiw's fourth principle states that the cost of something is what you give up to get it. Now, costs come in all different sizes and shapes and colors. There are many different types of costs. Some examples of costs could be fat stacks of cash. It's a very popular one, often used to buy things. Another example of a cost could be the time taken to complete a task. And finally, the energy taken to complete a task. Those are just some examples. Obviously, there are many different types of costs. Now, money, energy, and time are all things that we give up to reach a certain goal. They are all things that we need to give up to achieve something. And the sum of what we have given up to achieve something, the sum of the money, the time, or the energy, is called the cost. Number 5. Mankiw's fifth principle states that trade can make everyone better off. Everyone could be the world, the entire world. Everyone could be a household, or it could just be two nations, whoever's participating in the trade. Now, there are pros and cons to trading. One of the big pros is that trade is based on opportunity costs, which allows nations or people to specialize in making only what they are good at. For example, back in early colonial times, the settlers of the Massachusetts Bay Colony lived in close proximity to their Pequot Indian neighbors. Each side had stuff that the other side wanted, but they couldn't produce what the other side's stuff easily. So one day, someone has an idea. Oh, let's just trade our stuff for the other side's stuff, and we can make a profit. In this case, everybody was better off. The reason that everybody was better off is because each side produced stuff which they could produce with a low opportunity cost. Basically, they couldn't produce the other side's stuff cheaply, so they used their cheap stuff to buy expensive stuff. Number 6. Mankiw's sixth principle states that markets are usually a good way to organize economic activity. The reason that markets are good is because they allow businesses and households to respond to their own incentives freely. Markets allow businesses to choose who to hire and what to make, and they allow households to decide what to buy and where to work. And this is good because this allows businesses to achieve their own goals of making as much money as possible, and allows households to achieve the dream of buying lots of stuff. However, markets can go sour when businesses get a bit too much power and form monopolies. Monopolies are not good. Number 7. Mankiw's seventh principle states that governments can sometimes improve market outcomes. Governments have tools to shift the market in different directions. These tools are called fiscal policy. Some examples of fiscal policy are government spending or taxes, things like that. These policies are either expansionary or contractionary. Expansionary means that aggregate demand is pushed to the right, and contractionary means that it's pushed to the left. These are useful in different situations, namely recessions or inflationary periods. And they can be good or bad, just like the title of Mankiw's seventh principle says. Too much contractionary policy could be like a freshman's backpack. Definitely not a good thing for the economy. And too much expansionary policy could be like a senioritis, if you will. These tools can be used to great effect when used in the right situations and in the right amount, but they can also completely demolish an economy. Number 8. Mankiw's eighth principle states that prices rise when the government prints too much money. Mankiw's eighth principle is basically just an extension of the seventh. It's just basically stating one of the negative effects of fiscal policy, of too much expansionary fiscal policy, which creates rapid inflation if used to such an extent. This can be seen many times in recent history in the US and in Germany back in the 20s. In 1921 in Germany, a newspaper cost about 0.3 marks, like 30 cents if you will, but the next year it cost 70 million marks. So you would be carrying a wheelbarrow full of money if you wanted to buy a newspaper at the store. This is really an inefficient way to run an economy and devalues your money greatly in the international market. Number 9. Mankiw's ninth principle states that society faces a short-run trade-off between inflation and unemployment. Inflation could be represented by a man carrying a wheelbarrow of money, going to buy a newspaper, and unemployment could be easily seen in this beautiful reproduction of a picture from the Great Depression. This ninth principle is often modeled by what's called the Phillips curve. It basically shows that in the short run, society can choose between prioritizing and decreasing unemployment or decreasing inflation. But because most nations are rational people, they will make a decision at the margin and try to decrease a bit of both. Number 10. Mankiw's 10th principle states that a country's standard of living depends on its ability to produce goods and services. Now, this is a statement that is basically straightforward, but has some abstract ideas in it. The abstract idea is that of standard of living. Standard of living is a term that could be interpreted in many different ways. But what it basically means is productivity. Productivity is the goal of producing as much stuff with as little cost as possible. Remember, cost is Mankiw's fourth principle. And what this is saying as a whole is that the most productive nations, the nations that can produce the most iPhones and the most cars, just as a rough example, as cheaply as possible, are the most productive and have the highest standard of living. All right, well, that's it for Mankiw's 10 principles. Thanks for watching.